In 2017, Holden, along with the rest of the Australian car industry, finally shut its doors for good. So what happened to this engineering icon, this Australian colossus of car building that produced cars like the Monaro, the Commodore, and so many V8 supercar champions? Hatch McClay tells you the story. Holden was started as a saddlery business in 1856 based in South Australia before realising that horses were not exactly a growth industry. They then moved into the business of car building and would go on to become the largest car producer in the entire British Commonwealth. This attracted the interest of overseas car manufacturers, and in 1924 Holden became the exclusive supplier of General Motors in Australia. In 1930 a historic partnership was forged. General Motors, the owners of Cadillac and Chevrolet among others, bought out Holden. It would henceforth be known as General Motors Holden Limited, GMH for short. And in 1936 they opened their brand spanking new headquarters and assembly plant at Fisherman's Bend in Port Melbourne to spark a new chapter for Australian manufacturing as well as the Australian car industry. After briefly halting production of cars during World War II, in which time they turned to helping the Allied war effort, Holden restarted the construction of cars for General Motors in 1948. From there, they launched their first ever fully Australian manufactured car, the 48-215, also known as the FX. The price was set at around $733, and an unbelievable 18,000 people signed up to purchase the car without having even seen it, let alone driven it. By 1958, Holden had around 40% of the car sales in Australia to itself, thanks in part to its second design, the Holden FJ. And in 1962, the magic million sales mark was hit, thanks to a booming export market going as far as Africa, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. By 1964, Holden employed around 24,000 across facilities in Victoria, South Australia, Queensland and New South Wales. In 1977, a $300 million Holden expansion took place, including a new engine plant in their Fisherman's Bend factory. And in 1978 came the standard bearer, the coup de grace, the pièce de résistance for Holden, the mighty Commodore. In the 1980s, however, Holden started to face problems. They slipped from the top of the sales charts as the Ford Falcon dominated for 6 years. But by the end of the decade, they had retained their place as Australia's top car manufacturer. In 1990, the last Australian Holden boss, John Bagshaw, left the company, and in 1991, Toyota led the Australian market for the first time. However, market share did increase throughout the decade for Holden, rising from 21% in 1991 to 28.2% in 1999. However, once the Australian car building giant hit the 21st century, it all started to go horribly wrong. In 2006, that figure had dropped down to just 15.2%. And finally, in 2013, Holden announced that it would shut its doors in 4 years. And in 2017, the final plant in Adelaide closed, ending a wonderful era of Australian car making as financial woes proved too much for General Motors and other Australian car manufacturers to handle, leading to their inevitable demise.
No matter which way we applied the numbers, our long-term business case to make and assemble cars and engines in this country is simply not viable.
In 2017, when the Australian car industry finally died, 50,000 jobs were lost across the manufacturing sector. What kind of cost does that have, not only on an economic scale, but also a personal and cultural one for us as Australians? Only time will tell.